Good afternoon, everyone. Today's Battle Rhythm, Best Practices for Supporting Caregivers' Mental Health, will be hosted by Jeanette Gillis. Jeanette is the Director of America's Warrior Partnerships, the network. The network provides local veterans serving organizations with a connection to national resources when a veteran's request cannot be met locally. To find out more about the network, visit Jeanette at americaswarriorpartnership.org/the network. That's it for me. Jeanette, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Allison, and welcome everyone. I'd first like to give a welcome to all of our affiliate communities, all of our branches, our 4-Star Alliance members, veteran service officers, and all the guests that are joining us today. We have a great agenda for you. Today, we're going to hear from our subject matter expert, Shawn Moore. Shawn is the founder and executive director of Caregivers on the Homefront. So welcome, Shawn, and we're looking forward to your presentation. And next, we're going to connect to 2 national resources. The first one is Melissa Comeau. She is the director of the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network, American Red Cross Service to the Armed Forces. And we're also going to speak with Dexter Peggins. He's the peer support coordinator, caregiver support for the Defense Health Agency Recovery Coordination Program, Region 3, which is Louisiana, New Mexico, and Texas. So following these presentations, there'll be question and answer session. So please put your questions in the chat box throughout today's presentation. And finally, we're going to collaborate by going into small breakout room discussions. And that should be fun. We always learn a lot there and get to meet new people and talk about things that are important to us on this topic. Today's session will conclude at 3:15. So we have an action-packed hour for you, and let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce you all to Shawn Moore. And Shawn, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited that each one of you are taking the time out of your day to connect with us on all things caregivers. As Jeanette said, my name is Shawn Moore. I am the executive director and founder of Caregivers on the Homefront, and I would be remiss if I did not also tell you that I am the program manager for financial wellness for the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. So I am kind of wearing a few different hats today, and I wanted all of you to know that. I'm going to first give you a little bit of background about our caregivers throughout our nation. If you don't know about them, it's really hard for you to support them. So here's a little bit of background. If you didn't know, there are 5.5 million military and veteran caregivers in the United States taking care of our ill and injured service members and veterans. This information was taken from a RAND study that the Elizabeth Dole Foundation commissioned back in 2014. Caregivers provide $14 billion of uncompensated care each year. Uncompensated care each year. Our caregivers who are caring for our military and veterans are also experiencing worse health outcomes, greater strains in family relationships, and more workplace problems than their non-caregiver counterparts. So what does that mean? They have more depression. They have more anxiety. In their families, there are greater strains. So with their loved one, their spouses, their partners, as well as their children. Many of the caregivers for military and veterans have either had to leave employment altogether. These are careers that they had, leave school early, or went down to part-time employment. Time spent giving care and helping the care recipient cope with behavioral health problems contribute to depression in these caregivers. So from our very wonderful colleague, Dr. Roxana Delgado, and I'm sure many of you know who I'm talking about, her and her colleagues did a research last year that surveyed 458 caregivers. And in that, they found that 39% experienced interruptions in their education, and 23.6% reported suicidal ideation since becoming a caregiver. It's really important that we take stock in that number. For one, because we don't oftentimes hear about it. We hear about the veteran suicide. Yet caregivers to military and veterans are experiencing suicidal ideation at a rate that's really high, 23.6%, after they become a caregiver. Her study also indicated that an interruption of life events, loss of self, and caring for a veteran with mental health conditions and/or suicidality are significant predictors of suicidality in military caregivers. So in your programs, if you are supporting veterans, just know if any of those things are happening in a veteran and they have family, the family is experiencing those issues as well. So strategies for supporting caregivers, which we're going to talk more about in our breakouts, but something to give you some thinking thoughts about before you break out. So there must be a one-stop place to list resources specific to caregivers. If you have state-ran agencies that list veteran resources and you don't put on there veteran and family member resources or veteran caregiver and family member resources, you may be missing a huge part of that veteran unit, which is their family members. They may never even click on that if it's not directed towards them. So one little simple thing that you can do is just change the verbiage on that. You must provide opportunities for caregivers to meet each other. Until we meet each other, we think we're living in a vacuum. We're isolated due to many veterans isolating themselves. Therefore, if we're not around other caregivers, we think everything that we are experiencing inside of our home, we're the only one experiencing it. So then we don't talk at all. We have to have access to culturally competent mental health care. So this isn't only about the veteran having culturally competent care, which if they're in the VA system, they do. Our caregivers and our family members are unlikely to be getting that support from VA. Therefore, our community providers must be culturally competent in providing care for our family members and caregivers of veterans. We also have to include caregivers and family members in job fairs and higher education opportunities. So for universities and colleges to have a warrior resource center or a resource center for veterans, that's not being inclusive to those caregivers and family members and dependents who are getting VA educational benefits, yet they have nowhere to come on campus because it's not in the title. So they don't know that they can come in as well. Job fairs, same here. We are always targeting our veterans in specific job fairs for them. And as an afterthought, we'll say, oh, the family can come too. We have to make sure that we understand that if a veteran is injured or ill, they may not be able to work. Yet that family member and caregiver may need to work or want to work. If we're not providing job fairs for them, they're not coming. Another good thing to get involved with are the mayors and governors challenge teams. through SAMHSA and VA, making sure that you're a part of those programs and making sure caregivers are on those teams. So if any of you are involved in that, do do an overview of who's on your team and make sure that you have a caregiver on your team. So some more strategies for supporting our caregivers. We must be able to provide training in inclusive care, which is a program with the VA and the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, where it explains why and how caregivers can be a member of the care team and why they must be a part of the care team. We're with our veteran 24/7. We know exactly what is going on, even when they go into an appointment and say, I'm fine and everything is great. I imagine at times, if you ask that caregiver, they're seeing a very different picture. Policymakers, we must protect and expand state and local support programs for caregivers, expand respite care to veteran and military caregivers. Those are things that the state at the state level can do. If you're an employer, if you have a target audience of veterans, again, know that all veterans can't work, yet their caregiver or family member may need to and want to. So we need to offer paid family leave to these caregivers and offer flexible work schedules as well as remote opportunities. And then we're going to go into our breakouts and we'll talk about these support resources for our family caregivers and who is out there in this landscape that is specifically supporting our caregivers. I always talk about a holistic approach to veteran care, and that includes the family member, the caregivers, as well as the children. If we are only supporting the veteran in that family unit, you must know that as a caregiver too, so I'm a caregiver to my husband, who is a 23-year Army veteran. If he goes and gets care, goes to a therapy appointment and has a great therapy appointment, yet if I'm not getting care, and when he comes home from that great appointment and I look a certain way or I say something because I'm not being supported, then his great therapy day just went down the drain. And I'm going to tell you a short little story before we break out into our rooms. Imagine yourself as a caregiver. Imagine yourself as a caregiver to a veteran with some mental health challenges, suicidality being one of them. And as a caregiver, you get a gut feeling when you can't get a hold of that veteran, your veteran. And that gut feeling tells you that the day is not going to end very well. And imagine that you know that that day is not going to end very well because your veteran is suicidal. And you know you need to find your veteran. And you're not quite sure how. But you eventually do. And your veteran has attempted suicide. An ambulance takes him away, goes to the local VA hospital. And then that caregiver goes home that evening and has to tell her kids what happened. The veteran is being cared for, but not one person reaches out to that caregiver and offers resources, support, and asks if the caregiver is okay or those kids. That's happening. It happened to me 5 years ago. There wasn't one person that reached out to me to see if I needed anything. I had just gone through a traumatic experience. I'm the one that found my husband. I'm the one that had to go home to tell our kids what happened and trying to tell them in an age-appropriate way. And then for the next 5 years, living on eggshells, wondering when the next time would be. And oh, there's been next times. And seeing in my 12-year-old daughter a pattern that's been established where she is trying to prevent her dad from attempting suicide. That's what's going on in our caregiving homes. And without the appropriate support, mental health support, resources, that whole entire family unit is now not doing well, which leads to a higher rate of divorce, homelessness, suicidality, not only in the veteran, but the caregiver and the children. This is why this conversation is so important. And I hope in your breakouts that you start some conversation on how best to include the caregiver in any programs that you already have established, and or how you can best reach out to these caregivers and provide support to them as well as the kids. So I'm really looking forward to going into these breakouts and talking in how best to support caregivers and their children in these veteran homes, because there are 2.3 million children living in caregiving homes. So with that being said, Jeanette, Allison, let's do some breakouts so we can get down to the nitty-gritty on how to solve some of these problems that are in our caregiving homes.
Well, thank you, Shawn, for that very, very powerful message. We're gonna turn it over now to Melissa Comeau, and she is the director, as I told you before, of the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network, Red Cross Service to the Armed Forces. And Melissa is a tremendous resource for the caregiving community. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about what she does and how you can connect with her if you need her support and guidance. Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jeanette, and thank you so much, Shawn. Your powerful storytelling, along with all of those statistics, are really, really important and set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to share a few slides with you to give an overview of the program that I facilitate at the Red Cross. So who does the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network serve? So when we're talking about caregivers, we mean caregivers of all eras. So Vietnam, Korea, those who served in combat, those who didn't. It does not really matter. If they served in the armed forces, we want to make sure that their caregivers are supported. This includes all stages of life as well as all relationships. So oftentimes we think of the spouse or the partner. I myself am a caregiver spouse. My husband was injured. He's a wounded warrior, a combat wounded Marine, and it is my honor to be his caregiver. But we also know that there are parents who are caregivers, siblings, children that Shawn talked about, the 2.3 million children who are serving as hidden helpers, as we call them. Other family members. We don't often talk about aunts and uncles, cousins, other extended families, grandparents that are also serving in this role. Friends. And then lastly, the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network serves veterans themselves that are caregivers. So you might know a veteran who's caring for their own spouse, or a veteran that's caring for their own aging parents or a special needs child. The Military and Veteran Caregiver Network would be able to support them as well. If you don't remember anything about my presentation, but you remember redcross.org/caregivers, you'll get all of the information and all of the resources I'm talking about, as well as access to all of our programs and services. From redcross.org/caregivers, you'll see our caregiver calendar, and that provides information and registration for all of our events, webinars, trainings, workshops, and education opportunities. We specialize in caregiver peer support, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But we highlight all of our events as well as those of our trusted partners. Caregivers are coming to us looking for events in their own community, as well as those events that are available online. Next up is our Hero Care Resource Directory. And now if you're looking for resources for a veteran, this is a great resource. but we're here to talk about caregiver resources, a different kind of hero, and the Hero Care Resource Directory has those resources as well. There are at least 800 resources for every zip code in America. You can search them by military veteran caregiver filters and by different types of financial needs, housing needs, transportation needs. You can even dive in for caregivers to specific types of wounds, illness, injuries, diagnoses, to really get the types of resources and support you need right in your own zip code. So I mentioned peer support. So the Hidden Heroes RAND report that Shawn mentioned, published back in 2014, found that caregivers actually experience social isolation at greater rates than civilian partners. So the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network aimed to meet that need with caregiver peer support. We use two evidence-based peer support models, the reciprocal peer support model out of Rutgers University and the companioning peer support model out of the Life and Loss Transition by Dr. Ellen Wolfeld it's out of Colorado. And we do that in three ways. We have our online peer support community, we have your one-on-one peer mentor program, and we have peer support groups, which are by far and away our most popular. Our online community is the network. It is the hub. It is a safe, secure technology. It is Salesforce. It operates 24/7, 365. It has featured moderated groups. So these are caregiver specific topics. Everything in our community is curated and designed for a caregiver specific experience. So unlike some other places where people are getting this type of support, our whole community is dedicated to the military and veteran caregiving experience. You have a secure online profile, which you can participate anonymously. So sometimes people don't want to have their own picture or their own name. And because we vet everyone, we know who you are and you're able to participate in sort of the way that's most comfortable for you. We do train all of our caregiver peers to ensure that our content is appropriate and accurate. And accurate is really, really important in the caregiver space because especially the changing eligibility and regulations in the caregiver support program, any misinformation or disinformation can cause a lot of anxiety in a caregiver's life. So we really pride ourselves on accurate content. And of course, that mutual respect and confidentiality is very, very important. Now, Shawn did also talk a little bit about the crisis interventions that can be needed for caregivers. In that study by our dear friend, Dr. Roxana Delgado, they talked about the suicidal ideations of caregivers themselves. So we are actually training caregivers in crisis intervention for peers, which of course, the role of a peer is to get someone to a professional. So we train our caregiver volunteers in how to help facilitate crisis line calls, whether that's a three-way call or how to text or how to get someone who might be in crisis to the professionals for the best outcomes possible. And of course, when it's appropriate to call 911. We have a peer mentor support program. This is your one-on-one. Not to take away at all from the VA's peer mentor program, ours is a little bit different in that we provide full training for our caregivers in twofold. We have the core competencies for caregiver peer support, as well as a live training on whichever peer model the caregivers choose to volunteer in. So volunteering in an online community is a little different than a one-on-one mentorship. And again, that's a little different than facilitating a peer support group. We also have a very sophisticated algorithm, or our peermentormatch.com, as I like to call it, that matches caregivers with the closest lived experience. So we do provide training and ongoing support, not only for the mentees, but also for the mentors. And then last, but certainly not least, are our peer support groups, which by far and away are our most popular program. They are led by trained peer volunteers. There are about 10 to 15 caregivers. We do try to cap at 12 to be most therapeutic. They meet weekly for about 90 minutes, and we do offer them on nights and weekends to be convenient to caregivers. We are getting back out of the pandemic, trying to rebuild some of our community-based support groups. These are taking place in Red Cross facilities, in Starbucks, in faith-based institutions, really wherever the caregivers are comfortable. Red Cross can help facilitate those. We also have trained several partner organizations in our evidence-based best practice models, and really aim to hope to support, just the facilitation of this model of peer support for the betterment of the caregiver community. And as always, we have people that participate every week, as well as those that just drop in. And this last slide is just my contact information, but I'll make sure to drop some of this in the chat as well. And if you have any questions about caregiver resources, that's going to be the discussion I talk about before we turn this over to Dexter for his. And I will stop sharing, Jeanette, so we can turn it over.
So our next presenter is going to be Dexter Peggins. Dexter is the Peer Support Coordinator, Caregiver Support for the Defense Health Agency Recovery Coordinator Program, and he is in Region 3, which encompasses Louisiana, New Mexico, and Texas. So Dexter, I'm going to turn the program over to you, and once you're finished, we'll take a couple of questions. So please be throwing out your questions into the chat box, and we will go through a few of those before we do the breakout session. You're up, Dexter.
Hey, really quickly, just want to say thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Allison, and your team at AWP for this opportunity. And I would also like to thank all of the caregivers and those who tirelessly support our caregiver community. As mentioned, my name is Dexter Peggins, and I work for the Department of Defense Recovery Coordination Program as the Peer Support Coordinator for Region 3, which consists of Louisiana, Texas, and New Mexico. First thing I want to bring to your attention, the information concerning our National Resource Directory. The NRD, as we referred to, it represents one of the largest online collections of government and non-government resources specifically for service members, veterans, families, and military caregivers, with a particular emphasis on wounded, ill, and injured service members and veterans. Within the NRD, you're going to find over 18,000 vetted resources. The resources are actually taken through a 9-step vetting process, and they are also vetted annually, so as to make sure that each organization is in operation and it provides the resources that they promote. In addition, the resource directory is also is listed on the Federal Registry. When you come onto the actual website, which is nrd.gov, what you'll see the inquiry where you can search for whatever resource need that you have. You can drill it down by state, by location, by city, which will further help the caregiver or the service member find the resource that they need. You'll also see a collection of programs that actually make up the entirety of the recovery coordination program. Now, specifically, the CRD, the Caregiver Resource Directory, what that is it derives from the NRD. The CRD provides hundreds of caregiver-centric resources. The CRD is available both electronically as well as in a hard copy form. And we're proud to acknowledge that since its inception, we've been able to distribute over 300,000 caregiver resource directories. One thing I like to tell people is that within the CRD, you can find resources ranging from everything as far as getting a service dog trained to getting respite care. When you get on the actual website or when you get within the resource directory, literally you can download one page or you can download every page. Much to what Melissa shared earlier, the resources are very specific. So whatever the need is, put it within the search engine and you'll be able to find that particular resource. For service agencies looking to have their organization listed within the NRD and subsequently within the CRD, you can visit the NRD website, which once again is nrd.gov, and you can click submit a resource, follow the prompts, and you'll be able to have your organization listed for interest as being listed within the directory, and that whole vetting process will begin from there. You can also send information or questions concerning the whole process to info nrd.osd@mail.mil. Your email will be indeed answered by a real life person. Trust me. The last thing I'll say before closing out is that we also have a virtual peer forum. Our peer forums are held on the first Thursday of every month at 11 o'clock Eastern AM, and on the fourth Thursday of every month at 2 o'clock PM Eastern. Though the emphasis of the virtual forum is for caregivers to gain emotional support, for them to learn skills, and for them to share their stories and resources with one another. With that being said, Jeanette, I yield the mic to you. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. We appreciate that. So let's see what we've got here. I think we had one question about, is the civilian mental health world becoming more proactive toward caregivers, mental health services being stretched to the limit because of COVID, getting more granular as the population becomes a challenge. So I think sometimes we look at physical health care and physical caregivers, but what about mental health? Is that becoming more proactive? Shawn, did you want to share something with us? Oh, okay.
It looks like a little bit of trouble with the mic. Let's see.
Yeah, she says, go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, I just didn't want to overstep Shawn there. My point on mental health and what I'm seeing here is, another great resource is Give an Hour, right? Where we're seeing, a lot of people donate their mental health time. Cohen is another great, especially if you're looking for someone who understands the military veteran kind of cultural competency. But as we all know, mental health resources are just spread so thin for everyone, every population. We have seen a huge uptick in peer support to the point where Give an Hour now is also providing peer support. And now peer support isn't appropriate in every situation, but man, it really does make a difference. And so connecting to people, to peers, especially peers that are trained in crisis interventions or peers that can really lift up in those social isolation spaces, I think that's going to be a nice bridge while we all recover from what we've all been through in the last couple of years. So I'm holding peer support in a very special way. As I know, most mental health providers are also burnt out themselves. So giving extra love to your mental health providers when you don't need them. I know I'm sending extra love to all the ones I know supporting our caregivers. And then utilizing peer support resources and networks to really kind of bridge that gap right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great.
Got mentioned. Education, emotional psycho support, those sorts of things are really, really important right now.
Absolutely. And I think the other important thing to keep in mind is that, it doesn't have to be either or. People can be using mental health professionals and getting their therapy and their counseling and their group support, and also be supplementing that with some peer support as well. So not that.
Yes, it's complementary, not
absolutely.
Alternative.
And then some of the Psych Armor training, maybe for family or friends, or, Psych Armor has such a wonderful array of videos and educational things for all of us. So mental health is healthcare, and we all have to keep that in mind. Hugo has a question. He wants to know, does caregiver have a specific definition for different organizations? I think we kind of answered that, but does caregiver mean something different from different organizations?
So I can share that I have heard not necessarily a different in the definition of what a caregiver is. Usually it's someone who provides care for someone who has wounds, illness, injury, or aging. Now that can be, if you want it to be a military or veteran related caregiver, it is due to their service. Or if it's just a civilian, you don't have to add to, being related to their caregiving. Certain organizations have different eligibility requirements. So the VA has certain eligibility. When you go, it will talk about what will count as a VA caregiver, like you must live in the home. There must be a certain level of disability. And then other organizations, just in their own eligibility requirements, there might be certain areas of service that qualify you as a person's caregiver. But there is no, broad and sweeping caregiver. I think at Red Cross, we've tried to be as inclusive as possible, meaning that if you are providing care for someone, whether that's hands-on care, long distance care, because many caregivers don't even live in the same state as the person they're caring for, but manage, long distance care, whether it's mental care, emotional regulation, medication management. There's just so much to it that trying to be as inclusive as possible when thinking about caregivers helps you support as many as possible. I hope that's helpful.
Also, let's see, it looks like we're wanting to know about the eligibility for what a caregiver is. Is there specific eligibility from the VA for the program, for their program?
Yes, definitely. And I do have that pulled up to kind of show in my resource because it's ever changing. So I'm happy to report as of October 1st, it is now open to all areas of service because there are two programs at the VA. So there's the program of comprehensive assistance for family caregivers, and then there's the program of general caregiver support services. And both have different eligibility. Obviously, the program of comprehensive assistance has a higher echelon or a higher eligibility criteria. But I'm going to show what sort of the VA outlines is what that is. And I have kind of those handouts or the FAQs to go over. Or I can send those, to you, Jeanette. We can make sure that's sent out in the action report because it's very, very relevant to our community. Yeah. And the more that we can help people understand, going into that process, the better.
I think that would be great. And I've got one quick question to ask you of my own. One of the things, I'm a social worker, so I've been referred veterans to the caregiver program at the VA and all of that. And one of the things I've noticed over time, and I'm hoping this is getting better, is that it's very difficult to get approved for the caregiver program, but it's also very easy to get removed from the caregiver program. So are we seeing any changes in it being maybe a little bit not easier to get in, but just not being the same fight that it seems to have been in the past?
So I think when the Mission Act was passed, which expanded the eligibility to include all eras, there was some, I have to be careful how I say it, but they, in trying to make that program meet the needs of very different generations of caregivers and very different needs of generations of veterans, they didn't get it absolutely right. And so there have been a pause in how they're going to treat the legacy participants, those that were like post 9/11, and how that they're going to treat the incoming Vietnam, World War II era, because their care needs are different and their caregivers are very different. So I think they've been they've been transparent about the sort of acceptance rates and the graduation rates, or the whatever they're calling the people as they get expired from the program, and that's available on their website and things. But we've heard the same things. There currently is a 3-year pause on the program of comprehensive assistance for all legacy participants. So if you're a member or you're accepted now, you don't have to worry about being dropped for 3 years. They're using that time to really hone in and find out, how they're going to administrate this program long term. And then for new people coming in, I think the acceptance rate is still very low, but there's a lot of advocates that are leaning in, trying to make it more accessible because it is a life-changing program and needed by so many. So more work to be done for sure, but we do still see small acceptance, hearing about the stress of people, applying for it. And then of course the stress of being removed from it, maybe when you've been in it for a decade. So very, very valid concerns. I know there's more work to be done there.
I mean, it sounds like the work is being done. So they're trying to do the best they can with it. So let's see. I think if there's no other question, I think I'm going to turn this back over to Allison so that we have time for our breakout activity. The breakout activity is kind of where the rubber meets the road and we get to really talk to each other. So I don't want to cut that short. Allison, can you get us moving in that direction, please?
Thanks, Jeanette. For the next 20 minutes, I think we'll have about 20 minutes, we'll go into breakout groups. And this is always a collaboration activity. So this is for us to share information and to gain information back. So the leaders are there only just to get the conversation started. We all are responsible for collaborating with the group. Please be prepared to talk, and I'm going to give you a 60-second countdown when it's time to be done. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. Let's see. Let me do that. Here we go. Open up all the rooms. See you shortly. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you guys for your great discussions. I know you had. The rooms had a lot of different numbers of people. So I apologize for one room was really packed. So hopefully you guys were able to have any kind of discussion with that many people in there. So let's see. I'd like to go ahead and hear from group number 1, the key points. So that was identifying caregivers in your community. And that was with Dexter and Abby. So, well, Dexter, I see. There you are. Yeah.
Hey, so one of the key takeaways that we spoke about is caregivers having a hard time making the identifying with the actual title of caregiver. Oftentimes they're spouses, so they understand what it means to be a spouse. Taking their loved one to an appointment, well, that comes with the territory of being a spouse. However, that specific identifier of caregiver, a lot of times there's a disconnect. And because there's a disconnect with the title, oftentimes they're not getting the support that they need. And so helping caregivers to make the connection with the title, I believe is huge, and it'll be instrumental in ensuring that we get as many caregivers the support that they need.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Dexter. Yeah. People don't identify themselves as caregivers, but there's a lot of people who are caregivers. So being able to ask those questions and making sure to help them know that they're entitled to some resources and actually deserve them and need them. It's good. Let's see, group number 2, supporting caregiver children. So that was with Natasha, who was nice enough to fill in there on that group, and also Jordan. If you don't mind, can you everybody can put their videos on cameras if they want. You don't have to, but it's nice to have that conversation. So yeah, very good. Thank you guys. Natasha, would you share a few key points that you guys discussed, or would you like someone in your group to help? Jordan, you were in the group too. Can you
Hi.
give us hi?
Yeah, so we talked about supporting caregiver children, or supporting the children of veterans and caregivers.
Yeah.
And Natasha, out from Kansas City, Missouri, was talking about their Homefront hangout for children that they have to connect kids with other like older kids that have kind of like worked with their veteran and caregiver family for a long time, and like maybe they have a little bit more experience, and they kind of connect them and monitor them for like 6 to 8 weeks. And usually those kids are working on relationships and communicating, and they build friendships, and that's been really effective for them. And we talked with Chelsea at Narrow Community Care out of Raleigh, North Carolina. She works with a lot of veterans with TBIs and through Wounded Warrior Project. And we talked about how children during the pandemic were at home a lot with their veterans and caregivers, and how that's affected their mental health, and maybe like DBT skills and like supplemental therapies like that would be effective in supporting them if needed. I think that's mostly what we talked about.
Excellent. So Dexter and and Melissa, there on your both of you have resource directories, right? And on those directories, is there specific things for caregiver children on theirs too? Does it specify on both of yours? Yes for Melissa. And yes for Dexter. Perfect. So do remember that those resources are there for you guys as you look for help
And
for
Allison,
those
if I
caregivers.
could just
Yes.
add, so out of the new work with the Hidden Helpers and the Joining Forces and the Hidden Helpers Coalition, the Red Cross is launching a new resiliency workshop for children in caregiving homes. And we are recruiting children for this across the nation to pilot next year. And I put the link to that in our chat. So that's available for you all to share with your constituents, any child that might benefit from that. It's a peer group led by a licensed mental health facilitator to give resiliency skills to children who are in caregiving. So that's just some upcoming support. You know, more is going to be built out of that wonderful coalition, but that's something that we could benefit from you sharing as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Now, group number 3, integrating caregiver support in existing programs. So, Shawn, what was some key takeaways?
I think one of the things that we really talked about was some just lack of the awareness of who caregivers are and because there's a lack of awareness, we don't even think about opening up programs to these caregivers or family members. So really that's kind of what we talked about, and just how can we do a better job really of awareness in this space, educating schools, educating mental health providers in our community. And we kind of went down that route. We had a lot of quiet people on our group, although I think Hugo and I had a really good discussion. But that's really what it's about. It's education and making sure that people are even aware that there are military and veteran caregivers, and then what the kids are needing and going through as well.
Definitely. I mean, just like there's so much that needs to be done for these people who are really sitting at home and being the backbone of the family. And then in order to support the veteran, we really have to support those caregivers as well. So we need to do a better job of that. So definitely good discussion. And the last one was caregiver resources, which was the largest group, probably had so many people in it, you had no room to talk. So what do you have for us? Melissa, that was yours, I believe.
Tara, take it away.
Hey, you guys. Well, Melissa did a fantastic and awesome job of hosting the group. And we actually had a lot of participants that discussed a lot of really good resources. Some were there to share resources, some were there to gain resources, some were there to do both. Joshua is compiling a list that he's going to share with everybody. So I think it's going to be helpful to all of us on the call. So that's what we talked about.
Excellent. Yes, and we'll get all those resources in the after action. So please look at that when it's going to come your way within this week. And if I'm good, and if not, you'll get it next week. So Jeanette, I'm going to pass it back over to you to close us out. Thank you guys for attending today and sharing and discussing and being a part of this important conversation. Jeanette?
All right. So thank you so much to Shawn, Melissa, and Dexter for that wonderful discussion and presentation. And thank you all for participating and for collaborating and sharing. America's Warrior Partnership's ultimate goal is to improve the quality of life of all veterans and end veteran suicide by empowering local communities to know all of their veterans and serve them holistically before a crisis occurs. America's Warrior Partnership's model, community integration, amplifies local efforts by bringing the community's veteran serving organizations together to bridge gaps in available services and by connecting local groups to national resources. We believe that communities are best equipped to improve the quality of life for veterans, and we hope that today's Battle Rhythm provided you with powerful insights, best practices, new partnerships, and tools to do just that. Our next Battle Rhythm will be on December 5th, where we will focus on status and trends of veteran social clubs. I'm a little intrigued by that one myself. We hope that you all can attend. Thank you so much for being with us today, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.